Assalamu alaikum friends and family, and welcome to my YouTube channel Golastic Fest. Today we have a very special guest, Deputy Mayor James Rowe from the City of Wanneroo. I am very excited to learn about his journey and role and to see how the local council supports the community. Before that, I just want to say a few things to my Pakistani brothers living in Australia. Don't worry too much about the politics in Pakistan. Trust me, there's nothing much you can do. So stop wasting your time watching those TV debate shows where the same politicians been appearing for the past 10 and 15 years, making the same claims and fake promises. Now we are living in Australia, that's our home. So it's better to involve in the local government and see as a society what we can do for the betterment of the community. All right, enough of me saying. So let's welcome our guest, James Rowe. Hi, James. Thank you so much first of all, thank you so much for accepting my invitation for this podcast. Would you please like to introduce yourself, a little bit of your background, and how you became the Deputy Mayor of City of Wanneroo?
Oh, thank you very much for having me in the first instance. It's a pleasure to be able to share a little bit about my journey and what we do as a local government to support the community. I think that's incredibly important to not just be doing the work out there in the local area, but actually coming back to residents through a variety of different ways to let them know how we support them and their families in their day-to-day life. So my name is James Rowe and I am the Deputy Mayor at the City of Wanneroo. I was elected to the City of Wanneroo Council in October 2021, representing the South Ward. And that ward on council includes the suburbs of Girraween, Marangaroo, Alexander Heights and Kundoola. So I served as a councillor for the first 2 years of office, and then in November 2023 was fortunate enough to be appointed to the position of Deputy Mayor at the City of Wanneroo. After each round of council elections, the council of 15 people has a vote immediately after those elections as to who they would like to represent them in the role of Deputy Mayor. And thankfully, I was able to succeed in that vote. And so ever since October of last year, I've been serving in that position of Deputy Mayor. More from a personal standpoint, I've lived in the suburb of Girraween my whole life. And in my spare time, I very much enjoy reading, writing, and I do love coffee catch-ups with friends. So that's a little about me, James Rowe, as the Deputy Mayor of Wanneroo.
So James, what did you study and what motivated you to get involved in the local government?
Yeah, sure. So my first degree was a Bachelor of Arts with a major in history and a second major in political science, and I did that at the University of Western Australia. After completing that, I did an honours year in Australian political history, and I wrote a dissertation about immigration politics in Australia, in particular how the multicultural community could be supported by Australian governments. I took a break of several years working full-time after my bachelor's and honours degree, and then in the last couple of years I've gone back to UWA to finish my Masters of Law Policy and Government, and I graduated 2 weeks ago.
Oh wow, congratulations.
Finished my postgraduate degree now.
So when you were studying political science, or when you decided to study that, somewhere in your mind you knew that you're going to be joining this local government or politics in future. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd never considered it. It sort of happened organically on its own. I had always shown an interest in the council and what the local government was doing to support the community. However, probably in about 2021, maybe March or April, I'd just finished and left a job at the university, and I'd come to work for a Member of Parliament full-time. So I started to be involved a little bit more politically, and I thought to myself one of the best ways to give back to the community was to actually be a voice, a representative and an advocate for those particular groups and individuals. And it's one of those sayings that if you want change to happen, you have to be that change, you actually have to advocate for it. So I felt that the best way to do so at that point in time was to nominate for the council and to run for election. And thankfully, I was elected, and the rest is almost history at this stage.
Amazing. That's great to hear. So what are the main roles and responsibilities of a deputy mayor or a councillor?
Yeah, okay. So a councillor's role is defined in legislation. So we have a very strict role that talks about the different responsibilities we have in that position. So one is that we are meant to represent the district as large. And that really just means that you're elected by a ward, so a small group of suburbs, but when you are elected to the council, you represent the entirety of the City of Wanneroo. Now that includes 35 suburbs, more than 235,000 residents,
Wow.
all the way from Two Rocks in our north to Kundoola, where I represent in the south. So you're elected by a ward, but you represent everyone across that district. From a day-to-day perspective, it means that you attend meetings of the council to make decisions that impact and hopefully will improve the lives of the residents who live within the district. So we attend meetings every Tuesday at council. Some are council meetings, others are more informal discussions, workshops, strategy sessions. We attend those meetings and we make decisions on behalf of the residents. But there's another role that's not really defined within the legislation, and that is that as the representative or the advocate for the community, you want to be their voice and to be listening to the concerns that the local residents are experiencing. So you should, on top of attending meetings, in my opinion, also be engaging with the social media channels, so the different community pages and community groups that appear perhaps on Facebook. You should be attending community meetings of the different organisations, sporting groups, not-for-profit charities that we have in our local area, because if you're constantly in conversation and discussion with people, that's the best way to know what are the issues facing the community.
Fair enough, makes sense. So how does the council contribute to the betterment of the neighborhood and the local community?
It's really two different parts, capital and services. So capital, what I mean by that is that the council has a budget that it collects through annual rates and through other different sources of revenue. Some of those may be Commonwealth or state grants. It may be some commercial dividends through any investments that the council may have, or alternatively, the main source of revenue is residential rates. So the amount that is collected each year is distributed back to the community through different projects. And when I say capital, I'm really talking about improvements to sporting grounds so clubs can train and play. And particularly recently, we've seen a lot of investment in floodlight technology so that clubs will be able to play after hours, noting that a lot of them have their own work commitments as well.
Yes.
Or that dog walkers can walk their dogs with their families safely at night because the parks are well lit.
That's true.
Might also be building new libraries and community centres. So particularly, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about today, multicultural communities. So groups and associations that form have a place to be able to meet safely, office space to be able to conduct their business or to host cultural events. So that's one side of the way in which the council improves things for community, the capital side, how we do facilities. But the other side is really about service delivery. So we're not in the same space as federal or state government, where federal is may be responsible for higher education or defence or hospital system, or states responsible for the schools network. We have a more limited range of responsibilities, but we deliver things such as ranger services to keep people protected and safe throughout the streets. We deliver library services and staff who are able to be there to support people, particularly school students who go to our libraries after school finishes. We have youth workers in the City of Wanneroo who are making sure that our younger people are not getting involved in antisocial behaviour or anything that is limiting their ability to be a productive member of society. So in summary, council is involved in the physical side of the budget, which is the buildings, the parks, the sports grounds and the roads, but it's also involved in the services, which is making sure that people feel safe, valued and respected as members of our community.
That sounds amazing and I would love to be involved. So what are the prerequisites for someone who wants to become a councillor?
Well, you'll be pleased to hear that there are not many prerequisites. So a lot of it is about being elected to office. So there are some rules that are set out by the Western Australian Electoral Commission when we nominate. So you're not allowed to have a criminal conviction, and you need to be living within the district or owning property within the district. So that means if you wanted to nominate for City of Wanneroo, you have to be a resident or a landowner within the City of Wanneroo.
So when you say resident, you can be a tenant as well then?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes. So you don't have to be a property owner. We certainly understand that in the current market, it is very difficult for people to own houses, own property, and we wouldn't be wanting, as a society, people to be excluded from nominating as a candidate because they don't own property. So those are the only two formal prerequisites. But to nominate, you would think some of the encouraging signs would be that you are involved in your local area, that you have some connections already in place. Potentially you might serve on the committee of a local sporting club or P&C organisation perhaps.
Okay.
And that gives you a bit of an understanding of what's going on in the local area, but it also gives you a network. Because in every line of business, whether it be politics or more corporate sector, you can't do everything on your own. You need people to support
You
you.
need to expose yourself as well.
Absolutely, you do. Yeah.
So can you please briefly explain the process of becoming a councillor? Like, what is the step-by-step roadmap?
Yeah, so our elections are carried out by the Electoral Commission, so it's done independently of each local government, which is very important. So if you're electing people to your board, which is essentially what council is, you don't want really the local government to be responsible for that process because it's a bit of a conflict of interest. So we have the Western Australian Electoral Commission come in. Council elections happen every 2 years, always in October.
Okay.
So we won't be having any this year, but we will be having some next year in October 2025. Roughly from about July, the Electoral Commission calls for nominations. Now there's a certain number of days, usually about 7 or 8, where a person can go and nominate for council. They make a small deposit, usually about $70 or $80. They write a candidate bio, which is the information in about 150 words that explains why they want to seek the position of councillor. And that is also, very importantly, the information that goes out with the ballot. So you do want to make sure that what you say in those limited number of words describes who you are, what you'd bring to the role, what your plans would be. Once your nomination's accepted, we have what's known as a ballot draw, which is where they decide which order your name will be on the ballot. And then essentially the next 3 months are campaigning time. So that is where you are out in the community trying your hardest to be able to persuade people to vote for you in the council election.
So what decides the ordering in the ballot paper? Is that the alphabetical order?
No, so it's completely randomized. So they'll put numbers in a barrel or a box. They will shuffle them up, and then the numbers that are drawn are completely random. So the Electoral Commission wants to make sure that there's absolutely no possibility of favoritism, so that our elections are free, fair, and legitimate.
Apart from being a good public speaker, which you are,
Oh, thank you.
what
I
other
tried to be.
what are the skills and experience a person should possess if they are planning to become a councillor?
Yeah, the first thing, and I have met in my 2.5, going on 3 years on council, I have met with people who have been interested in running. Some have chosen that path, others have chosen to be more involved as a volunteer perhaps, not running for office in the end. But the one piece of advice I always give them is you must care about your community. And it can't be inauthentic, because most residents are very good at being able to figure out when someone is not being transparent with them or not being authentic. So you need to genuinely care about the area that you're trying to represent, because that means your advocacy and your representation will be strong, it will be true, and it will actually have the impact that you're wanting to have. So that's the sort of thing that I would say is the prerequisite for running. The next would be that it would be encouraged or desirable to have some skills in the different type of work that we do. Now, not everyone does. Not everyone comes on with knowledge about strategic thinking, because we are involved in developing strategic plans and policy formulation. Not everyone is financially literate, so not everyone's managed a budget or reviewed what we have, which is called warrants of payments, all of the transactions that go on in a local government. So sometimes those skills can be picked up along the way after you're elected, but it certainly helps to know how the finances are managed, and it certainly helps to be able to think strategically when you're doing this job. And the other piece of advice that I always give people is do not make promises that you cannot keep. So that's my main advice, because when you're coming in, everyone's very passionate about change and they have this grand vision of what they want to achieve, but you are one voice on a council of 15 people. So you can't achieve anything alone. You need to be able to win people over. So only make the promises that you can actually keep and deliver, so then you're not automatically letting people down if you can't do what you wanted to do.
That's true. So what are some of the biggest challenges you faced as a councillor or still facing as a deputy mayor?
Yeah, okay. So one of the challenges that I have faced is that I'm not the youngest member of our council, but I'm the second youngest. And I do think when I was elected, there was an age disparity on council. There were some council members, and I didn't experience these issues directly myself, but there were some council members who had been on council for 20 to 25 years. So their entire service on council spanned my life, which when you put it like that, it's quite significant. So one of the things that I have faced is that I'm not a property owner at the moment. I'm looking to buy a house, but the current state of the market makes it quite difficult for me to be able to be a property owner. So if you're not owning property and you're quite young and relying on limited experience, whether it be job experience or personal experience, sometimes that can be a challenge. However, it is also a unique opportunity because you're bringing a new perspective, the perspective of someone who's a younger member of the community, and you're able to use that perspective to advocate on behalf of other young people, which is one of the reasons as an advocate on council, one of the things I believe in the most is making sure our council is diverse and representative. Because when you have diverse voices around the table, you have much better decision making, and you know that your decisions and your discussions will reflect what actually is going on in our community. So that's one of the challenges I experienced.
So you mentioned you are the second youngest in that board, and that board comprised of 17 councillors.
15
councillors. So what has been the most rewarding aspect of your role?
The most rewarding aspect has been to deliver outcomes for the area in which I grew up in and still live in. So my parents moved to Girraween after they were married in 1990, and it was intended as a first home, but as is often the case, it has become almost a forever home. So that is the area in which I've grown up in for quite some time, and I was elected to council believing that it was an area that I won't use the word neglected, but it was an area that was forgotten in some cases. We didn't have a large number of wealthy property developers creating estates. Girraween and a number of other suburbs in that area, Nollamara, Balga, they were originally set up as affordable social housing for people in need. That meant that we didn't necessarily have fantastic looking community centres or sporting grounds with pavilions. But since I've been elected, a lot of that conversation has been around how can we balance the scales so those areas that were developed in the 70s and the 80s can once again gain new life, so they're looking like an appealing and an attractive place to live for young families and people of diverse backgrounds. Since I've been elected, that conversation has changed, and we're having more discussions about equity and equality, and we've seen some small wins, whether it be bringing important items like community centres and a project close to my heart, the Girraween Hub, back on the agenda, but even the smaller things like delivering a gazebo down at the local park in Girraween, and that gazebo means now that when the multicultural cricket club that plays on a Sunday, if there's ever any rain, the children can sit under that gazebo and be shielded from that bad weather. Small thing, but it's something that can actually have a very big impact.
That's true. Well, apart from being a community worker serving the community, let's talk about the means of how you survive financially to put food on the table for your family. So let's talk about salary. Can you please give some information about this salary and packages a councillor or a deputy mayor may receive?
Thankfully, I can tell you none of this is confidential because all of our salary and remuneration is available on the website for the City of Wanneroo and all local governments. We believe in being transparent around who has earned what and what they have delivered as a result of that salary. The first thing that I'll say two things before I give you the specifics. The first is that, in my opinion, the position of councillor is not a sustainable full-time job.
Okay.
It's not a job that, with the salary it provides, could be, you could survive on that full-time. With all of the other discretionary expenses that people have, whether it be utilities, whether it be rent, whether it be mortgages, whether it be their children's education, it's just not sustainable. The second part is that the salary, and I should be using the word allowance because it's not a salary. It's not something that's taxed progressively throughout the year. It's taxed at the end of the financial year when we go and visit our accountants or do our tax ourselves, and then we get hit with a very massive bill. It's dependent on the size of your council. So smaller councils that are classified as potentially band 3 would have lower allowances because it's recognised that the quality, not the quality of work, but the type of work they do would be more limited. Fewer meetings they would have to attend, representing fewer residents. So they're not actually as time committed as councillors in larger local governments. We at the City of Wanneroo are now the biggest local government, so we're band 1. And that means that we represent a larger number of residents. We attend more meetings, and generally our agendas are longer. So the work associated with that is quite significant. Councillors roughly at the City of Wanneroo are paid between $35,000 and $37,000 a year as an allowance. And that really only covers our attendance at meetings. So anything that we do on top of that is because we care about the position and we want to invest our time and energy back into that role. So between $35,000 and $37,000. The Deputy Mayor's allowance is a little bit more, so roughly at about the $50,000 mark. But the reason I say it's not sustainable is it's under the median wage that a person would earn for full-time work. And with all of those cost of living factors that I've just mentioned before, it makes it difficult to be able to survive full-time on that kind of wage, which is the reason why people on council either balance this alongside other work commitments, or they may be retired, surviving also on superannuation or pension, or alternatively they may have a spouse who works full-time and they will do the council role, so they're able to combine or complement their incomes.
Makes sense. So apart from attending council meetings and representing your local residents, how are you engaging with those residents so that their voices are being heard?
So I myself have a Facebook page that I use as my main form of digital communication with residents. And that's grown organically on its own over the last 2.5 years. And I quite enjoy that style of communication. Now, it has its own challenges because sometimes you'll face off against keyboard warriors where people are far more comfortable saying things online in a way that they wouldn't feel comfortable being able to give that criticism and sometimes abuse to your face. But that's the main way that I communicate with my residents, but also my phone number and my email address are available on the website. So I'm constantly receiving calls and emails from residents asking me to follow up on local issues that are facing the community or potential ideas and projects that they'd like me to investigate on their behalf. So those are the two sort of informal channels. Throughout the 3 years that I've been on council, I've always believed in face-to-face communication as well. So occasionally I will host coffee catch-ups or meet your councillor events at local parks. It's not so critical that a lot of people show up to those. I just want to make sure that if a resident has a concern that they'd like to discuss with me, I might say that I'll be at this coffee shop between 10 and 11 on a Sunday. you're welcome to stop by and have a cup of coffee and a chat. And that just means that if residents do need to talk about something and they would prefer not to send it in an email, or they might not have Facebook, well, there's another way for them to be able to communicate with me. So it's important to cover all of those bases.
Makes sense. Can you please highlight some of the common concerns raised by your residents and what valuable ideas they have shared with you for the betterment?
Yeah, excellent. So I genuinely believe that some of our residents in our community are the very best. I genuinely believe that. They are considerate, tolerant, decent, honourable people who contribute a lot in their day-to-day lives. And the fact that they're so willing to engage with council, despite all of the different time commitments that they already have on their shoulders, it demonstrates that they care about community. Some of the concerns that I've really been presented with over the years have been around the type and quality of the facilities that we have access to in the South Ward. So because a lot of our libraries, community centres and club rooms were built in the 1970s, they're really at that end of life status at the moment. So what the council is trying to do is to prioritise the redevelopment or the refurbishment of these facilities. And from the people who are using them on a day-to-day basis, there's definitely been quite a lot of challenge with their functionality, whether they are now disability access friendly for people who are in wheelchairs, because the planning laws and regulations and the types of things we considered when we built things in the 70s are very different to the modern standards of what we would consider acceptable. So that's one of the things that residents have been focusing on. And then the other, of course, is cost of living pressures.
Yes.
Everyone at the moment is really struggling to be able to make ends meet. They are spending a significant amount of time on their household budgets to be able to really try and put food on the table for family, to support the people that they love and they care for. So some of the ideas that they've been coming forward to us on council, from the building side of things, they've been really engaged on making sure that our library and community hub is fit for purpose and it has social services that the community can access. People there from the City of Wanneroo that they can pay their rates in person or seek payment plan options, or to be able to find some form of financial hardship support. Those are the ideas that have come through me. Alternatively, some residents have just been concerned or focused on local projects, which give me joy as well, which might be ensuring that there's a new limestone walking trail in the Kundula regional bushland, so that bird watchers and walkers and hikers can be able to go and enjoy what is pristine, bush forever, protected environment in our local area. So as their councillor, I'm so incredibly proud of them, because the ideas that they come forth with are not just about things that impact them, but things that will impact the community as a whole. And that, as a councillor, is perhaps the most rewarding thing, when your residents want to pay it forward to their fellow residents. It's inspiring, really.
It is. All right, let's talk about migrants and multicultural community. So many new migrants may not be fully aware about their rights and responsibilities. So how does the council take initiatives to educate them and inform them?
Yeah. So council is one level of government. So we have federal government, state government and local government, and particularly with supporting our multicultural community, particularly our culturally and linguistically diverse community. I think each level of government needs to work productively together, and it needs to communicate with each other about the types of supports that are on offer.
Yes.
From a federal government perspective, a lot of the inquiries we get are around visa processing and how long it takes for a spouse visa or for someone to be able to access passport or citizenship. Now that's firmly outside of the control of the local government, but it definitely is something that we hear a lot about, where residents are separated from their family because they don't have citizenship status, and that can obviously have an impact, not just physically or financially, but also on their mental health and their well-being. From a council perspective, we work closely with the Office of Multicultural Interests to be able to deliver some support services, some seminars, whether it be activities at our local libraries and community centres. I've been in the libraries before where they're doing English language workshops or they may have a multicultural parents group where it's an opportunity for people from diverse backgrounds to be able to come together and to share their stories and their experiences in a safe and in a respectful environment. So often council's role is in providing the facilities and establishing and supporting the network that allows those activities to be on offer. One of the things that we do as well, because the City of Wanneroo is one of the most culturally diverse communities,
Yes.
more than 40% of our residents were born overseas, and a significant number speak English as a second language at home. We have a committee, an advisory group, known as the Multicultural Advisory Group, that has cultural leaders in different parts of our community. They attend meetings, usually quarterly at council, with senior leadership, including the mayor. They share their experiences and their concerns and their frustrations. And a lot of that is inputted into our decision-making process. So when we make decisions that impact our community, one of the things we consider more is how will it impact someone who's from a diverse background or someone who doesn't speak English at home. And that controls everything, like how we write our letters that go to residents, or what types of events we sponsor and support to be able to ensure there's cultural celebration. So those are just some of the things that council will do to be able to support migrants and migrant communities.
Do we get some grants from the local government if we are running some multicultural events,
Yes.
seminars, or anything something like this?
Yeah. So council itself runs 7 local events throughout the year. The one in the South Ward is often a multicultural themed event that includes all of our local multicultural groups and cultural associations, and that usually ties in with Harmony Week. So it's a wonderful celebration of culture and diversity. But the city also has a community grant fund that supports cultural associations and groups who would like to organise their own events. So often they'll do so at a community centre or a local park, both of which are under the management and responsibility of the local government.
Yes.
But the council also can provide some financial support to an applicant who would like to be able to run an event as well. And we have done so before. And a recent example, I remember the council provided a grant for the Canyon Association to be able to do a wonderful multicultural event in Marangaroo, and it was well attended and it was a great celebration. And I know that they believed that one of the only reasons they were able to do that event is because they had the support from the City of Wanneroo to be able to facilitate.
So there was some financial assistance from the
Financial planning, and then also some support around the different ways to manage an event, because it's a lot of work that goes into the plans that you need to submit. The fact that if you're using electrical appliances for cooking or for anything like that at a park, good electrical products need to be tagged and tested. So there's some requirements that I know council assisted the group with to be able to run and deliver a fantastic event.
Fair enough. So what are some of the common problems migrants face here, and what are the strategies in place that local government help them in resolving those problems?
So one of the main things is that sense of belonging, that sense of how can I be a participant in this community, particularly for people who come in and there's cultural shock. So there's a sense of the culture that I'm experiencing or what's going on in my local community. It's very different to what I'm used to. And if that is the case, then we need to be able to have those support networks in place. So culture shock is definitely one of the things we experience, particularly from people who English is their second language. And then it's also just understanding government processes. It's not an easy thing to do. There's a lot to get your head around with a local government. Recently, I attended an event with an African community up in Carramar, and a lot of the feedback that I was getting is that there's a sense of distrust for police or for security services and rangers, because in their home country, those figures can't be trusted because there's a lot of brutality and a lot of violence, and the potential for racism that exists over here and for cultural bias. And sometimes it's unconscious, sometimes it's more sinister and deliberate, but that distrust can really impact a person's ability to feel safe, valued, supported in their own community. So the city has a number of strategies in place and actual plans that guide the way in which we communicate with our multicultural community, the way in which that we design and implement our policies to be able to focus in on how it would impact these communities. And as I mentioned before, establishing an advisory group means that the feedback is provided by the cultural leaders in each of the multicultural associations across our city. And that feedback is incredibly valuable because you're hearing it from the people who are most impacted by the types of events or the decisions that we make. So you want to make sure that when you do something, you go out there and you ask people for feedback and you get that feedback directly from them.
So how can a new migrant get involved in the local government activities? Apart from meeting the councillor for a coffee catch-up or a day with the councillor in the park or reaching out on social media, that's they're raising their concerns. But if they want to do something for the betterment of the community, how they can get involved? They're not a councillor yet, they're just a new migrant, moved a year or 2 years ago. So what do you think, what should be their approach?
I think first off, they should be involved in everything the City of Wanneroo has to offer. So the city, as I said before, it runs 7 local events and then some larger events throughout the year. Those events are a great way where there's local stakeholders who are there, whether it be through marquees or presentations or things like that. That is the first way to be able to actually be part of and to witness and observe what the local government does on a day-to-day basis. So those are the events that people can get involved in. From a digital side of things, I would encourage them to follow the Facebook pages of the City of Wanneroo, of the different sub-branches of Wanneroo that we have, maybe it be the library or the youth services, and then of their local councillors. Because if you follow your local councillor, you'll be able to see not only news and updates that affect your local community, but also you'll be able to see what your representative is doing for you. And come election time, it's a very good way to be able to assess whether that representative has been active in the community or if perhaps they haven't been as active as they should, and you may want to look elsewhere for where you vote. So those are the digital side and the events, but of course, migrants and anyone in particular, anyone is most welcome to attend our meetings. Our council meetings are open to the public, and for those who are unable to get to Wanneroo Civic Building to watch our meetings, we live stream on YouTube. So you can watch it as well. Yeah, it's very good to know.
Okay. All right. So I think we covered a lot of things. As a last message, what advice would you like to give to the person who are considering to become a councillor in future?
Yeah, I would strongly encourage people to consider it, but I would also encourage them to ask themselves several questions. One would be, do you believe you have the time availability to dedicate to the role? Because your residents deserve an active representative, an advocate who genuinely will give them 4 years of strong representation and leadership in the community. To ask yourself if you are passionate about the local area and the local community, that you feel that you have a responsibility to give back, because that really is a prerequisite to wanting to run. It shouldn't be about self-motivated reasons. It should be about how you can provide for others, how you can deliver for others. And then think if both of those answers are you have the time availability and you have the commitment, think about what skills you bring to the table and what you need to do between now and the next elections to be a competitive candidate. And that's all around what is your message, who is your network, what are your plans and your priorities for that local community. And if you can summarize all three and have a clear understanding of who you are and what you want to do, you will certainly be competitive when it comes to election time.
Perfect. I think I have covered most of the questions that I prepared for this podcast.
Too long.
No. Thank you, James, again for sharing your insights and experience with us. We appreciate your time and valuable information. Thank you so much for watching this podcast. I hope it will be very informative for everyone living in Australia. Have a nice day. Allah Hafiz.